Unit 1, Part 2, Research Methods, Thinking Critically with Psychological Science. In a difficult moment after an argument with a loved one, a social embarrassment, or a bad grade, to whom do you turn? For advice and comfort, we often turn to friends and family or search online. Psychology can also shed insight. Psychologists start with the questions that intrigue all of us. How can we be happier, healthier, and more successful? What can we do to improve our relationships? Why do people act and think as they do? But as a science, psychology does more than speculate. It uses research to separate uninformed opinions from examined conclusions. Page 38, Module 4, The Need for Psychological Science. Some people suppose that psychology is mere common sense, documenting and dressing in jargon what people already know. You get paid for using fancy methods to prove what my grandmother knows? Indeed, Grandma is often right. As the baseball great Yogi Berra, 1925 to 2015, once said, "You can observe a lot by watching." We have Berra to thank for the other gems, such as, "Nobody goes there anymore, it's too crowded," and "If the people don't want to come out to the ballpark, nobody's going to stop them." Because we're all behavior watchers, it would be surprising if many of psychology's findings had not been foreseen. Many people believe that love breeds happiness. For example, and they are right, we have what Module 55 calls a deep need to belong. But sometimes Grandma's common sense, informed by countless casual observations, is wrong. In many other modules, we will see how research has overturned that is, familiarity breeds contempt, that dreams predict the future, and that most of us use only 10% of our brains. We will see how research has surprised us with discoveries about how the brain's chemical messages control our moods and memories, about other animals' abilities, and about the effects of stress on our capacity to fight disease. Other things seem like common sense truth only because we so often hear them repeated. Mere repetition of statements, whether true or false, makes them easier to process and thus more true seeming. Easy to remember misconceptions, vitamin C prevents the common cold, can therefore overwhelm hard truths. This power of familiar, hard to erase falsehoods is a lesson well known to political manipulators and kept in mind by critical thinkers. 3 roadblocks to critical thinking: hindsight bias, overconfidence, and perceiving patterns in random events help illustrate why we cannot rely solely on common sense. Did we know it all along? Hindsight bias. Consider how easy it is to draw the bullseye after the arrow strikes. After a dating couple breaks up, their friends say they were not a good match. After the football game, we credit the coach of a gutsy play wins the game and fault the coach for the same stupid play if he doesn't. After war or an election, its outcome usually seems obvious, although history may therefore seem like a series of inevitable events. The actual future is seldom foreseen. No one's diary recorded. Today, the 100 Years' War began. This hindsight bias, also known as the "I knew it all along" phenomenon, is easy to demonstrate by giving half the members of a group some purported psychological finding and giving the other half an opposite result. Tell the first group, for example, psychologists have found that separation weakens romantic attraction. As the saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. Ask them to imagine why this might be true. Most people can, and after explaining it, nearly all will then view this true finding as unsurprising. Tell the second group the opposite. Psychologists have found that separation strengthens romantic attraction. As the saying goes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. People given this untrue result can also easily imagine it, and most will also see it as unsurprising. When opposite findings both seem like common sense, there is a problem. Such errors in people's recollections and explanations show why we need psychological research. It's not that common sense is usually wrong. Rather, common sense describes, after the fact, what has happened better than it predicts what will happen. More than 800 scholarly papers have shown hindsight bias in people young and old from across the world. As physicist Niels Bohr reportedly jested, prediction is very difficult, especially about the future. Overconfidence. We humans tend to think we know more than we do. Ask how sure we are of our answers to factual questions. Is Boston north or south of Paris. We tend to be overconfident than correct. Or consider these anagram solutions. Reet to water, Eterin to entry, grabe to barge. Page 40. About how many seconds do you think it would have taken you to unscramble each of these? Did hindsight influence you? Knowing the answers tend to make us overconfident. Surely the solution would only take 10 seconds or so. In reality, the average problem solver spends 3 minutes, as you also might, given a similar anagram without the solution. OCHSA. Are we any better at predicting social behavior? Psychologist Philip Tetlock collected more than 27,000 expert predictions of world events, such as the future of South Africa or whether Quebec would separate from Canada. His repeated finding: these predictions, which experts made with 80% confidence on average, were right less than 40% of the time. Nevertheless, even those who maintained their confidence by noting they were almost right. The Quebecois separatists almost won the secessionist referendum. Perceiving order in random events. For most people, a random, unpredictable world is unsettling. We therefore have a built-in eagerness to make sense of our world. People may see a face on the moon, hear satanic messages in music, perceive the Virgin Mary's image on a grilled cheese sandwich. Even in random data, we often find patterns, because here's a curious fact of life: random sequences often don't look random. Flip a coin 50 times and you will likely be surprised at the streaks of heads or tails, much like supposed hot and cold streaks in basketball shooting and baseball hitting. In actual random sequences, patterns and streaks, such as repeating digits, occur more often than people expect. That also makes it hard for people to generate random-like sequences. When embezzlers try to simulate random digits when deciding how much to steal, their non-random patterns can alert fraud experts. Some happenings, such as winning a lottery twice, seem so extraordinary that we find it difficult to conceive an ordinary chance-related explanation. But with a large enough sample, any outrageous thing is likely to happen. Noted statisticians Percy Diacones and Frederick Mosteller, 1989. An event that happens but 1 in 1 billion people every day occurs about 7 times a day, more than 2,500 times a year. The point to remember: hindsight bias, overconfidence, and our tendency to perceive patterns in random events tempt us to overestimate the value of common sense thinking. But scientific inquiry can help us sift reality illusion.